Many people regard you as a personification of Ubuntu. What do you understand Ubuntu to be?
In the old days when we were young, a traveler through a country would stop at a village and he didn't have to ask for food or for water. Once he stops, the people give him food, entertain him. That is one aspect of Ubuntu, but it will have various aspects. Ubuntu does not mean that people should not enrich themselves. The question, therefore, is, are you going to do so in order to enable the community around you to be able to improve? These are the important things in life. And if one can do that, you have done something very important which will be appreciated.
This is the Open Source Report on the 4th of June 2018 from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. We roll along here. We'll start out with the kernel and exactly where it is. We usually do this. It is at 4.17. That is the current kernel from the Linux kernel archives. And let's see, what do we have? I believe we have 4.1.4.47, I believe, is the Slackware kernel. Get this a little mixed up at times. They've been incrementing this up, and eventually they will get to 4.15, and then, of course, 4.116. Now, there is the 4.17 kernel that is the latest stable kernel. Now, that is on the 3rd of June. And the kernel we have is a kernel from around May the 30th or so. But any of these kernels would be standard as far as kernels are concerned. The big story today is GitHub. And we'll go to that. We've been working on it all night here when we first found out about it. And basically what is going on there. Microsoft has been in talks to acquire GitHub. GitHub is a coding site, and the coding repository, as they call it, popular with, of course, software developers, could announce the deal as soon as Monday. This is from Bloomberg. GitHub preferred selling the company to going public, and chose Microsoft partially because it's impressed with Nadella. The CEO said, one of the people who asked not to be identified. The terms of the agreement weren't known, but GitHub last was valued at, and that was in 2015, at $2 billion. Now, it is based in San Francisco, and it's been trying to find a new CEO. GitHub is essentially a tools for coders, and many corporations there, Microsoft, Alphabet, Google, GitHub to store their cooperative code, and collaboration is there. The kernel is there also. It's also a social network of sorts for developers. While GitHub losses have been significant, it lost $66 million over 3 quarters in 2016. Its revenue of $98 million in the 9 months of that year. In August, GitHub announced it was looking for a new CEO to replace the current CEO, Chris Wanstrom. Is a co-founder, interim let's see. In the interim, GitHub Chief Business Officer Julio Avalos. Microsoft has talked to GitHub on and off for a few years. Recently, they began talking about a partnership, but progressed discussions of an acquisition. GitHub has an estimated host 27 million software developers and working on 80 million repositories of code. Microsoft once was opposed to this type of open source software development, is now one of the biggest contributors to GitHub as Nadella increasingly moves the company away from the complete dependency on the Windows operating system. The Windows operating system, incidentally, is dying year by year. And part of the reason for this is that the other operating systems out there, Linux, the Mac OS operating system, and various others are all given to the consumer free, literally. And Android, we don't want to forget Android. Android, of course, is on Chromebooks, and Chromebooks have replaced a lot of the Macs and various other Dell computers in classrooms because they are very inexpensive to operate. So thus, this is a business-driven decision. It is not something that Microsoft did out of, as they say, their version of do no evil, and we need to go to petty moralizing. Microsoft is not interested in that. But when we look at the software movement, and since this is the open source report, we need to go to it. Free and open software, that is FOSS, free and open software, free and open source software. I said I should have gotten that a little bit better there. Free and open source software, FOSS, can be classified between free, and that's where we move more and more towards that. Libre, we call it open source software. That is, anyone is freely licensed to use, copy, study, and change the software in any way. The source code is openly shared so that people are encouraged to voluntarily improve the design of the software. This is in contrast to software like Microsoft's. Proprietary software is dying more and more every day, where software is under restricted copyright, and the source code is usually hidden from the individuals. The benefit of using FOSS could include decreased software costs, increased security, stability, especially in regard to malware, and protection of privacy. Free open source operating systems, Linux, etc., powers servers in a desktop, smartphones. Of course, Android is there. Free and open licenses, open source licenses are used by many software packages. The free software movement and the open source software movement are, of course, online communities. And there is a big division there. Now, the one we support is the Free Software Foundation. Nearly all open source software is free, but the two terms describe almost the same category of software, but they stand for views based on fundamentally different values. Thus, the Open Source Initiative considers many free software licenses to also be open source. These include the latest versions of FSF, the GPL license, the lesser public license, the LGPL, and the GNU public license there. And free software. This is Dr. Stillman at MIT. Definition adopted by the Free Software Foundation defines free software as a matter of liberty and not price. Earlier known publications defined here's a free software idea in 1986 of the FSF, now discontinued GNU Bulletin publication. The canonical source for the document is the philosophy section of the GNU project, and it's published in 40 different languages, and it's at Cranston.com. The open source definition. Now, this is used. We've also talked about it, used by the Open Source Initiative to determine whether a software license qualifies for organizations insignia open source software. The definition is based on Debbin's free software guidelines, written and adopted by Bruce Perriner. Perriner did not base his writings on the 4 freedoms of free software from the Free Software Foundation, which were only later available on the web. Perriner subsequently stated that he felt that Eric Raymond's promotion of open source unfairly overshadowed the Free Software Foundation's efforts, and reaffirmed his support for free software. In the following 2000, he spoke about open sourceware. Eric Raymond has been a thorn in the side, a libertarian type, a person that is a disaster, quite literally. In the 50s through the 80s, it was common for computer users to have source code for all programs they use, and the permissions and availability to modify it for their own software, including source code, were commonly shared. I'm reading from Wikipedia here, but this is the information, and most companies had a business model based on hardware sales. Organizations of users were formed to facilitate exchange of software. Share and Decus, member of Share, I've given presentations at Share conferences. That's the IBM mainframe users conference. User Blue, it's called. In 1983, Dr. Stallman, a longtime member of the hacker community at MIT's Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, announced the GNU project, saying that he had become frustrated with efforts of change in the culture of computer industry and its user. Software developers. The GNU operating system began in 1984, and the Free Software Foundation was founded in October of 1985. The Linux kernel, started by Linus Torvalds, was released as a freely modified source code in 1991. Initially, Linux was not under the free or open sourceware license. However, version .12, that was in February 92, relicensed the project under the GNU general public license. Like Unix, Torvalds' kernel attracted the attention of volunteer programmers. Free BSD and NetBSD, both derivatives of, were released as free software when USL versus BSD lawsuit was settled in 1993. There was a fork involved there, and the Apache server community, referred to Apache, was released under the Apache license. Now, this is something to remember. The Apache license, we started with Apache when they first came out. Now, under that particular phone, there are many, many, many projects. This was the Apache HTTP server. We still get their updates here at Cranston. The Eric Raymond published The Cathedral and the Bazaar, a reflective analysis of the hacker community and free software project. The paper received significant attention in early 1998. We've talked about Raymond before. The Netscape, a communication code to reach their popular Netscape communicator as a free software. Today, the code is better known as Mozilla Foxfire and Thunderbird, which we use here. Back to Raymond again. Others to look at how to bring the Free Software Foundation's ideas and perceived benefits into commercial industry. They conceded that the free software activism was not appealing to companies like Netscape, no doubt about it. So this was when they came up with this open software initiative that was in 1998. And this is one of the things we have to be very, very careful of. These characters going around here talking about free software. That's why we have made the transition to Libra software that is a free software and in more entitled of what is happening these days. The open software presence on the net, we go to IBM, Oracle, Google, State Farm, and just a few companies with serious public stake in today's competitive open source market. You know about State Farm, but yes, Google is there. Oracle, they give some lip service. They even have, I think they still have an Oracle Linux. They do have, in addition to Oracle, they have their database. I think they still are running that. FOSS is often free of charge, although donations are encouraged here, and that's free and open software. But we are moving a little bit beyond that and moving to a more sustained pattern. And we don't need to get too much into what is going on here in terms of governments. Now, the GPL version free controversy, we don't need to talk much about the version free of the GNU public license. That was in 2007. And I believe that's the one that we have up there. The Oracle versus Google. Oracle and Google claiming the use of Java in Android infringed on Oracle's copyright. Case ended in 2012 with a finding that Google did not infringe on Oracle's patents, and the trial judge ruled that the structure of the Java API used by Google was not copyrightable. The jury found Google infringed on a small number of copied files, but stipulated that they would pay no damage. Oracle appealed, and Google filed a cross appeal on the literal copyright claim. Google won the appeal, but Oracle did, but Google was subsequently won a retrial, and is one of the things that you go through there. So this is some of what went on here and where we are. So where do we go now? That GitHub will become a part of it. It won't affect the free software Libra movement as such. We found this. We started out with Ubuntu 8.8. I mean, we might as well talk about it. And that's where we found this out and started tracing it down last night from Bloomberg and from others. Ubuntu uses it. Google uses it. Apple uses it. And, of course, Microsoft themselves. And the reason that Microsoft is doing that is the cloud is a Linux-based operation. It is more and more open source software is in the cloud, and Microsoft wanting to be part of the cloud had to come along for the ride. In fact, Microsoft now has a version of Linux. Microsoft here love Linux, and this is just a business decision over whatever Nadala says. On the leadership has yet to do anything other than embrace open source software and Linux, and etc. There are a lot of talk. In fact, Linux and open source play a key role in Microsoft's current probability. And this is all about probability. Microsoft's new OS is powered by Linux. If Nadella is to steer his company away from over-reliance on Windows software towards the merits of open source software, it will need to find a better way to connect with and engage with the development community. I can recall when we had the .NET developers, which died off. Steve Ballmer running around talking about that period. And the article goes on here, and we can attest to this. Microsoft isn't capable of, that's not to say screwing things up. Redmond has made an absolute mess of Skype, which it acquired in 2011, no doubt about that. And part of that is the environment that Microsoft, there are still people at Microsoft that base this on their products. If, in fact, you get something like Skype, they try to slip Bing and other things in the back door. By all means, be cautious, be suspicious. Based on its previous acquisitions, be fearful of failure and keep skepticism healthy. Remember that we live in 2018, not 1998. Open source software is some value, a niche and overlooked option, and it now, of course, powers the world, period. And this is from Ubuntu, and Ubuntu itself has been flirting with various canonical, with various schemes here, and one of the things that they've been trying to do. And I don't know. This is 18.04, things to do after installing 18.04. This is the latest Ubuntu, and Ubuntu is just a Linux distribution, primarily for the desktop. It's certified by IBM as a server, but there are some problems with Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a big update. It features tons of new features, significant changes. There's a new desktop, a new Linux kernel, new applications also. And before you do anything else, you'll get up to speed with Ubuntu. And so we might as well just get this. Additional updates to 18.4 LTS have been released since you made the installation. Ubuntu offers to install third-party codecs like, well, Adobe Flash has pretty much bit the dust, so you can sort of forget that one. And there's some other things. He won't get into that in what it's used. It's not using the Kili version anymore. It is using the Gomi version here. And some changes to on laptops and portable devices. For instance, a right-click method of the touchpad without a physical button. You need to perform a two-finger click. I'm not sure what all that is about. Installing a better Ubuntu theme. It's, if I'm looking at it here, it's basically the same old Ubuntu. Haven't had Ubuntu on a box in a while there, but we've always liked the Nomi version here. I've always liked it over Kili. So I mean, there's a lot of individual preferences going on here. Let me quickly here look at the time. Where our stress today is a travel day. We're rolling along here pretty good. Android. We need to go to Android. Some Android type This is Bloomberg buying GitHub would take Microsoft back to its roots. I'm not sure how they figured this one out, but this was updated yesterday. Would both be a return to the company's early roots and a sharp turn from where it was decades ago. The software makers agreed to acquire GitHub, a code depository. This is from Bloomberg. And this talks about Ballmer, who now owns don't hear much about them. The basketball team, the other basketball team, not the Lakers, but the Clippers, the LA Clippers, jumped up and down on stage cheering for the developers. Bill Gates and Allen founded the company to give hobbyists a way to program a new microcomputer. This was the Octari, but even as Ballmer celebrated the developers building a proprietary software for Microsoft. This is in the early 2000s. He and his executive team were highly critical of the kind of open source programs built on GitHub today. Well, Ballmer is not in business anymore. Microsoft changed because of the environment. And talking about them being a big contributor, yes, no doubt about that. And basically, it is the same situation. So we brought this to you first here on the Open Source Report. Let me just very quickly here get to the Android situation. We had hoped to let's see. The Android devices shipped with pre-installed malware. This is from Avas's, their blog. We'll have to append this on. The Avas Threat Lab analyzed malware that has affected thousands of users around the world. Unfortunately, this is not always the case. When you get a brand new phone, you expect to have it clean from any malware out there. And some of the offenders is ZTE. Now, ZTE has been temporarily banned from the U.S. That's a Chinese smartphone manufacturer, and also across the majority of devices that are not certified by Google, but in fact they actually do a ZTE have a version of Google 8, that is Oreo, on their devices there. And I didn't have time to look at this. I think that you could probably root the device and upgrade the firmware. But anyway, Avas users located in more than 100 countries, including Russia, Italy, Germany, and the UK, as well as some users in there. Past month, the latest version of adware around the world, 18,000 devices. And this is just their particular Avas's software. We've used it at one time, or we don't use it now. We were in touch with Google, and they were aware of the issue. Google has taken steps to migrate the malware's, to mitigate, the malware's capabilities using internal developed techniques. The Play Store protection, we've seen that around, and we've observed strange Android samples coming into our database from time to time over the year. Recently, one of the samples topped our detection statistics after the threat in the ATP.io intelligence platform. There's one of their platforms. And in from 2015 was pre-installed on a budget tablet sold in Poland. Now, this is one of the malware applications there, and the old APK we are old and date back to 2016, 2013. Now, there is a server out there that is supposedly down. The hosts of CC, new payload, we contacted CN CERT, as well as the company that hosts the CC server, and the server was taken down on the 10th of April 2018. The domain, however, is still alive. So that's one of the things we look at here. Download manifest from this is in various subdomains involved in this scheme here. Detecting the dropper is further complicated by the fact that it is a system app, part of the device read-only firmware, which is integrated in the device shipped from the factory. Is also likely indexed in other firmware, meaning the app's code was removed from the original APK file, optimized and stored separately during the firmware building process. So more problems arise here. We found 100 other different payload, versions here. We'll put this on. This is one of the problems sometimes we installed. And in these countries, our statistics, users in over 90 countries are affected. The top 10, of course, Russia, Italy, we went through these. I think we got them all. Ukraine, Portugal, Venezuela, Greece, France, and Romania. A list of devices affected can be found here. Devices run different Android versions. Now, this is not the one we were talking about from 4.2 to 6.0. Not all device models listed are affected in this particular situation. So we were looking, whoops. Now ZTE and Archos, one of the, not sure we have. There's a lot of different devices here. Who the ZTE is one of the manufacturers. Prestige. I'm just looking through some of these. This is actually on a spreadsheet. So there is a lot of different manufacturers out there that we have honestly not apps not heard of. This sometimes occurs. Anyway, we'll look out for that as we move along here. Just looking at our Twitter feed at Cranston Software. And Reverend Barber and his Poor People's March, immediately give a plug there for him and his Poor People's March pops up. Dan Rabbit pops up, and various others. Incidentally, one of the things we have been, and it's on our Twitter feed, Cranston Software, the Texas Linux Fest. We've been promoting it this Friday. Kicks off. Come join us. It's in Austin, Texas, the 8th and 9th of June. And we'll quickly retweet of that particular situation. Glad to know they're starting to get some information here from various sources as far as promoting. We promote Linux Fest user groups here at Cranston. We continue to do that as we move along here, and part of what we do here. And this is the TechCrunch GitHub situation. We'll redo it. I'm not sure if this is, no, this is actually from them. We have our own implementation that moved across here, so many different things all going at once. And as our Twitter feed redoes itself, also Linux Inside, the big idea blog for sys administrators and for geeks. I had not looked at this one before, just as we are moving around here a little bit. Some reason and let's see, we follow them already so that we know. And this is FOSS Mint. Many Linux users prefer the command line to a GUI. I'm not sure about all of that anyway. One of the things that sometimes pop up as we move along here, and we are moving along pretty quickly through the Twitter feed here and looking at our time, at the same time looking over our head. Mathematician at NASA, Katherine Johnson, being honored in bronze. She was a mathematician, which calculations brought about the Apollo. This is from the Seattle PI, one of our favorite publications. Used to live in Seattle before Microsoft got in there, but now they are there. And he's showing her, the mathematician there. She'll be 100 years old. Literally, West Virginia State University says dedication is planned on the day before, August the 25th. So we have something new to look at here as we wind down our presentation here, but reminding people of GitHub and the Microsoft acquisition. That is the big news of the day here as we look across the world and see where the Libre/free software movement is going. And when we mentioned that, Ralph Nader popped up. So Nader is a good man. Oh boy. Ian was just a Raspberry Pi, a new post, free learning resources on the Raspberry Pi. You can always check them out. I've been amazed by the Raspberry Pi and some of many little projects around the Raspberry Pi weather stations, prototyping sensors, etc. A lot of really neat stuff for the geek in all of us. Here, so throw it down here for people, and basically this is it. So we'll go back to our workstation here and finish up this open source report. And one of the things that is happening here is this merger. It should be announced, acquisition, not a merger, later today, to bring the repository, the largest one, under the control of Microsoft. We have to be very, very skeptical of it. And one of the things, remember, we live in a dark, more proof we live in a dark timeline. This is from Ubuntu. So even the Ubuntu people are a little bit nervous about this, which is a good situation. We need to apply a value judgment here as to what is going on. We noticed a I believe Reuters had it. I didn't see anything on the BBC pertaining to this acquisition. BBC is a little. Maybe we go to the tech part. Well, they don't have it up here yet, so we'll have it up before they have it up. Very strange situation there. Nonetheless, this will do it for our open source report on the 4th of June 2018. This is MA at Cranston Software, our sponsor, and been the sponsor since our creation, the open source report. And we started in open source via what was called shareware at the time, and basic Linux toolkits in 1988. And through the first kernel, and then on to Slackware, which we still run on our servers, and we've continued to move on. Very interesting there. There are other distributions out there. Ubuntu, of course, is more of a desktop type of distribution. There's SenseOS, there's Mint. There is many distributions out there that you can use, but remember that in a Linux distribution, it is both a workstation and can be a server. It's customizable. You can run it on old hardware. You can run it on new hardware. One of the beauties of it's a nice development platform. And most of these, particularly Slackware, has Python there. It has the libraries that you need, etc., to teach yourself Python, PHP, or whatever you want to do. You can be all that you want to be, so to speak. Anyway, have a good week, everyone. We'll talk to you soon from the doors of Cranston. Hello, world.